Good morning. Thank you for being here. Or for you, good afternoon, good night, whatever the case may be for you. I see Chippy Sweet is here. Mark is here. All right. So it's me, Ari Dossett, or as you know me, Rashid. This is another live. And when this live builds up on the previous live streams about gang stalking, I've explained what gang stalking is, how it comes into being. I've explained that failed gang stalking, when gang stalking fails, leads to a meltdown. In this live stream, I'm explaining to you what will happen after a meltdown. So that will be the topic of this live stream. And this live stream will not take that long. I expect maybe 30 or 40 minutes, or maybe less. We'll see. It's as simple as that. But before I continue, how many of you witnessed a meltdown before? Maybe a small one, maybe a big one around you. How many of you witnessed a meltdown? Let me know in the live chat. How many of you? By the way, when you leave comments, let it be related to the topic and no funny, weird comments, please. Thank you very much. I put someone on a timer for 5 minutes now. I don't know who Simon Biles is. So, okay. The reason I'm asking if you had the meltdown before is because a meltdown is when the bitterness and the resentment explodes in a community. That is when what a meltdown is. For in case you were confused about it, a meltdown is when the bitterness and resentment explodes in a community. Now, when this happens, there will be an increase in criminal activity. There will be an increase in burglaries, increase in rapes, homicide, maybe even a massacre that happens. Anyway, some violent explosion of bitterness happens. Why? Because all that negative tension against the victim backfired on the crowd. All right? So, you can see it like this. Okay? Let's say you're on the road. I'm using a parable now. I want you to imagine this with me. Let's say you are on the road. You just came from some shop purchasing some sweets. And suddenly you see everyone running away. You think, why is people running away? You see they're all running away towards the east. Then you look towards the west, and you see from far off the whole road is empty. So you're thinking, why are people running away? And people telling you, get off the road, get off the road. There's a truck coming, there's a truck coming. And you think, which truck? And suddenly you see the truck. It's a giant truck, a very big truck that goes full speed. And due to the speed of the truck, you realize that even if the driver would use brakes now, the brakes wouldn't be able to slow the truck down. So what do? When you see this giant truck going full speed and everyone's running away, from its direction. What do you do? Let me know in the live chat. What do you do? Yes, gypsies said jump out of the way. Marky Mark says find a safe place to get away from the truck and then pay the safety on the public. Well, the answer is correct. You're not going to stand in the middle of the road telling the driver to stop because the driver lost his grip on the steering wheel. And likely the driver is drunk anyway, so he won't be able to see you. And you don't have the physical strength to stop that giant truck from crashing. So the only option you have is to get out of there. Well, a meltdown is similar to a giant truck without any brakes going full speed. Once that truck crashes, it's going to be big damage. People are dead. It may have crashed into a building, so the building may have exploded or collapsed, or it may have ended up in a river or whatever. After the crash, they'll have to rebuild the place. After the crash, people are going to do an investigation to find out how did this happen. How this truck ended up on the loose like this. And then they will take action to prevent such thing from happening again. Well, that's what they do naturally out there. Now, the parable of the truck on the loose is to explain to you what happens after a meltdown. After the crash of resentment in a community, when the rapes have happened, the massacres took place, or when the brawls happened, then the government, through the police, will measure the damage. The economic damage, the psychological damage, the societal damage. And then sociologists who are hired will explain that the reason why this meltdown happened in the form of much crime or massacres or whatever is because the public was upset and the public had no outlet for their resentment. And because the resentment built up and exploded in the community. So we need to figure out why the public was so upset. And then, for example, they may figure out that before the meltdown, the people were gang stalking this guy called Freddy. And this Freddy was just a high school student. So if they figure out that the gang stalking of this Freddy backfired, what happens then is that the authorities will do their best to rewrite history. So if this Freddy was denied access to a trade school, and the reason was denied was due to gang stalking, they will rewrite history and say that he was denied access because he wasn't ready for trade school yet. Something that doesn't add up. Freddy knows it doesn't add up. People that knew Freddy know that doesn't add up. But the public will believe it. Or maybe your father left the family. He just disappeared. And after your father left the family, people began to target you because you were an easy victim. And when it backfired and was a meltdown, now suddenly people say, well, your father passed away during a car accident, which is not true. Or you say your father had to find himself, so he went away for a little while and he went missing. They will rewrite history with some nonsense narrative just to hide the guilt of the masses. That is what they will do. So the rewriting of history will take place just to prevent the crimes of the crowd from being exposed. Because after a meltdown, what's important for the community is to continue. So if the history of what led to the meltdown is remembered, that itself is going to be a repercussion on the community. And the next generation is going to grow up in a very awkward situation. And then the community will further disintegrate. So to preserve the community, they will rewrite history. The same happens in the United States with mass shootings. If a guy who with a Confederate flag decides to go to a black church and kill a lot of black folks, and he even made plain on the internet in a manifesto that he did this to start a race war to protect the quote-unquote white race. Now you'll have psychologists saying, no, the guy was mentally ill or he was bullied, it was just one that escalated. They'll try to soften what happened in the reports. But the thing is, it's obvious. This guy was a racist terrorist that had the courage to do the act. This means that he comes from a racist and terrorist environment. That means there are many more people out there with similar ideas. He was just the one who dared to act it out. So once this comes out, people are not going to trust one another anymore, and you have another meltdown after you have meltdown after meltdown. And because you don't want meltdown after meltdown, you rewrite history, not in the sense that you deny what happened, because you can't deny the fact that this massacre happened, but you are going to make, you go to turn into a mythology to hide what really happened. The same happened on the 6th of January. Was the 6th of January of this year? Anyway, the same happened with the insurrection in Washington, D.C. And by the way, it wasn't only in Washington, D.C. that the insurrection happened. It also happened in many other capitals of state capitals. Okay? So this insurrection was an obvious insurrection and white supremacy crashing on itself. So they also are busy writing that history, right as we speak now. But the problem is this history has been witnessed by millions worldwide. So it will be very difficult for them to write this history with all the proof in your face. In the past, when the internet and mainstream media and social media did not exist and communication was slow, it was much easier to rewrite history. But even then, rewriting history was a very exhausting task because rewriting of history will always bring holes in the story. Black Wall Street. Black Wall Street was not the only massacre against black people that happened. You had Oscarville in Georgia, you had Wilmington in Delaware, you had many more black towns that were harassed and people were lynched there. Why? Because the prosperity of the Afro-Americans angered a lot of the other people. So they will say things as, well, Black Wall Street was abandoned due to the economic crisis. Well, there was an economic crisis back then, so that thing failed. Or they would say, well, Wilmington, Delaware, other blacks went away because there was more work in the South. They will come, maybe it's true there was a lot of work in the South back then. Well, how come most of the black folks left Wilmington, Delaware at the end of the 19th century? That's because we're being lynched over there. So people will do this even with you. If people treated you badly and the evidence and the proof of them treating you badly is obvious to everyone gets uncomfortable and everyone feels humiliated. So then they'll try to rewrite history. They'll come up with some type of myth to cover up the fact that they did you dirty. The fact that they took out their frustrations on you. Instead of looking for solutions, they're going to hide this. The fact they are cowards who just want to explode on people, they want to hide this by pretending like they're good citizens. So that's how they do it. Because if you're not able to come up with a proper mythology to justify the anger of the crowds, you'll have meltdown after meltdown. And the constant point that the meltdowns are so frequent that the whole community will lose its minds and become suicidal. You don't want that to happen either. Such things happen in history, that the whole community became suicidal and they went off with one another. That's why mainstream media is there. Mainstream media is to generate the modern day mythology to cover up the anger of the crowd. Think about Iraq. Didn't George W. Bush said that there are weapons of mass destruction in Iraq under Saddam Hussein? They invaded Iraq. Oh, they also invaded Afghanistan. Where are the weapons of mass destruction? They were never found. And years later, George W. Bush even made jokes about weapons of mass destruction. So they lied. There were no weapons of mass destruction. They just couldn't handle that those Arab or Muslim nations were prospering without white supremacy. They couldn't handle this. So they used 9/11 as a cover-up to shut down those Islamic economies from becoming too independent from American imperialism. That is what happened. Because till this day, they cannot justify why they were in Iraq and in Afghanistan. If the guy who was behind the shutting down of the Twin Towers, even if he resided in Afghanistan, should have cooperated with the local authorities in Afghanistan to arrest him. And by the way, the hijackers lived in the United States, and hijackers were dead. So the whole idea of invading Afghanistan and Iraq, it was all a plot to preserve the economic relevancy of the United States, which was fading away. The economic relevancy of the United States crashed in 1999 because the United States only had an economic bubble at the end of the Second World War. And this bubble remained firm though to the Cold War era, but after the Cold War era ended in 1989, within a decade, the economic strength of the United States faded away in Asia. Because many of those Asian nations were now industrialized and firm on themselves. So the United States needed some export zone for them to remain economically relevant in the world. And 9/11 became the ritual that enabled them to extend the lifespan of the United States a little bit more. That was it. Even scholars who are against conspiracy theories are admitting that the whole story of 9/11 was just a big scam. So, yes, indeed, Marky Mark. The computer scam 2000 was to confuse people so they could relocate money. Because the economic strength of the United States was gone in 1999. Many other Asian partners told, hey, we're sorry, it's over. But the United States wanted to pretend like they were still on top and still running the place. So they extended the lifespan of the United States for 7 more years. And in 2008, the economic leverage of the United States crashed completely. So the invading of Afghanistan and Iraq were only distractions from the economic crash of the United States that was about to happen. And for 7 more years, they were able to delay it till 2008. 2008, it was obvious, it's over. And the European Union was already prepared for it, so they formed the Treaty of Lisbon so that the European Union could continue further as their own economic zone, apart from the influence of the United States. So 2009, you had the Obama presidency that began. You also had the Treaty of Lisbon that came into force of the European Union. So the Obama presidencies were 2 transition phases to transfer the economic and political power from the United States to the Islamic world. But because there was no Islamic nation to take the lead, things were delayed further and things crashed more. And then suddenly you had the migration crisis that happened. The migration crisis ended up in the rise of right-wing populism, which led to further disintegration in the West. And then you also had the COVID pandemic that hit, that's affecting us still this day. So all of this is the crash of the United States that we're covering up. From 9/11 all the way till today, 20 years are 20 years in which they desperately were holding on to the dominance of the United States. Well, the dominance of the United States ended in 2008 already. That is 14 years ago. No, it's 13 years ago. Let me see if I do this around 2008, 2021. Hold on a minute. It's 12, 30, yeah, 13 years ago. The economic dominance of the United States was gone, and the political dominance was fading away under the Obama presidencies. Trump was the last resort, the last pathetic attempt to restore the dominance of the United States, and it failed completely. So, meanwhile, the European Union has the 2020-2030 agenda. It ought to rescue the pyramid scheme. So the world itself is in a clash, is in a crisis right now. And what they don't tell you is that according to prophecy, all the crisis here around you is according to prophecy. Because there is a frontier prophecy for the tribe of Judah, and after those 400 years, things would backfire. So they knew that around 2019, 2020, things would backfire. They didn't know how. So years before, they were coming up with those scenarios, with those scripts. What if this happens? What if that happens? What can we do then? Because they knew not only that the economic dominance of the United States would be over, but also that worldwide, the white supremacist world order would face backlash. That's what they've done to the Judeans for hundreds of years. So that's where we are now. They don't know how to move forward. And the thing is, they cannot move forward because this is the restoration era of the tribe of Judah. That's what we're in now. You will have the great tribulation somewhere in the future after the restoration, but that will fail also. So there is no turning back. What you will have from now on is meltdown after meltdown in the Western world and also in Asia. That's why you have mass shooting after mass shooting in the United States. Scandal after scandal. It's meltdown after meltdown. And it's not only the United States, it's the whole Western world. Meltdown after meltdown. They will not be able to stop this. Before 2019, they were successful, often in generating mythology. But since 2019, it's not possible anymore. Things keep backfiring every time to try it. They won't stop. They will continue to do it at their own detriment. So you just so you know, this was going on. This is to inform you. This is to inform you that there are going to be meltdowns after meltdowns. And by the way, YouTube, I'm not saying that everything that happened from 2019 till now is a full scam. No. A lot of things that happened are real. It's a real crisis. But well, I'm just saying as it is. This crisis is not going to be over anytime soon. Many of the original people in the Black Lives Matter, in the beginning, they believed in real change, and they really want real change. It was with Trayvon Martin. But over the years, it became obvious that the funding of Black Lives Matter was not from Black people in general. So it became obvious there's something behind it. A lot of Black people came to abandon Black Lives Matter. It's only with George Floyd. A lot of people joined Black Lives Matter for practical reasons. But soon after, they realized, whoa, there's a lot of white supremacists using this as an excuse. A lot of people abandoned it. And that's why I told folks, leave Black Lives Matter alone. It's time for something much better now. So even Black Lives Matter backfired on them and worked in favor of the tribe of Judah. So now you know. Normally or naturally after a meltdown, history will be rewritten and there's ease. People will avoid to pretend like you never existed. And rewriting of history can go very far. Sometimes a whole school may shut down after you leave that place. Sometimes a business will go bankrupt. Sometimes they will even fire people. When the community is rewriting history, they'll go very far to prevent their past meltdown from being noticed. But this time, worldwide, the writing of history will not succeed. So the meltdowns will unfold, unfold, and unfold, leading up to the Great Tribulation. So, what do we do as saints? We recognize the time we're in. It's going to be meltdown after meltdown. We know that. So, because we know there will be meltdown after meltdown leading up to the Great Tribulation, we expect there's going to be meltdown after meltdown. We're not going to expect a fairy tale. There's not going to be any fairy tale rescue. It's going to be a meltdown after meltdown. So what we do is, while the meltdowns keep on unfolding and the writing of history fails by the world, we just expand economically. And by expanding economically, we will have our own economic base that we can use as a leverage against the blackmail of the world. That is what we should be doing right now. So, it's very important for you to recognize the times you're living in. There's not going to be any rapture, and there's not going to be any escape to the heavens. Till the Great Tribulation comes, there's going to be meltdowns. So recognize that meltdowns are here. They're not going to go away. So learn to navigate around them. That's what we should be doing. But in churches, they will never talk about this, because most people go to church to get an escape anyway. But I'm telling you here plainly, no escape is going to be successful and worth it. So The more meltdowns occur, the more delusional people will begin. That's another sign that you're going to see coming times. Coming times, there's going to be more delusions. There are even black people now who are claiming that slavery never happened, but that they're official indigenous Americans that were already there. This day, where are the slave ships? Even though slave ships used to be cargo ships that used to be sold again or dismantled afterwards. Because after slavery was abolished, there was a lot of steamships. So of course the slave ships were used as sail ships are gone because most of ships afterwards became steamships. They come with ridiculous arguments saying, no, we weren't shipped from Africa, we're already here. Try to rewrite history so that they don't have to deal with the meltdowns that are going on right now. It's called the FBA, Fundamental Black Americans. That's how the movement is called. Please stay away from this movement. This movement is a delusional movement where people want to avoid facing the here and the now. The thing is that before slavery, blacks had empires in West Africa. Mansa Musa, the richest man that ever lived, was from Mali. So, and even then, in ancient times, you had the ancient Ethiopians who shut down the Romans from conquering them. And the ancient Ethiopians had far more pyramids than the ancient Egyptians. So why aren't people talking about that? So, those black Americans, because this only happens in the United States. No black outside the United States falls for this nonsense. And even if they do, reality kicks back in very quickly. A lot of Afro-Americans, it's just a tiny minority, but a lot of them are so delusional that they want to escape at all costs. Haven't they forgotten that the Native Americans were genocided by the United States? So why do you want to identify with people that lost, while you came from people that won because they're still alive and still multiplying around? Afro-Americans have more economic power than Native Americans. Yet you have Black Americans who want to identify with Native Americans. Even if you had a great-great-grandfather, grandmother that was a Native American, you're still Afro. Plain and simple. So please, if you hear about the FBA movement, avoid it. Please avoid it. Nothing good will come from this movement, I'm telling you. If white Americans would tell you, hey, we didn't came as migrants from Europe, we were already here, everyone would laugh at them. If Asians say, hey, we didn't came as migrants during the Spanish Empire or as work migrants in the 19th century, we were already here, everyone would laugh at them. You had tanned and dark-skinned Amerindians that were around, but those were dark-skinned Amerindians. They were not Negroes. They were not Afro people. The Afro people come from the Bantu, which are the Judeans. Plain and simple. So if you're Afro, then you know where you're coming from. Just because many of the dark-skinned natives were classified as Negro eventually by the colonial powers does not mean that all Black people were already there. By the way, those dark-skinned Amerindians are not Blacks. They're not Africans. They're just dark-skinned Native Americans, plain and simple. People go very far in escaping. And I'm telling you, I don't want any part of this FBA bullshit because it brings more harm than good. For example, during the Roman Empire, there were people from the Judean or diaspora or from the African continent of Africa that migrated into Europe. Many of them remained in Europe after the Roman era. So that's how you have what they call Black Europeans. They were from the African diaspora. Many of them lived under the Muslim-occupied Spain and Portugal. Some of them, minorities, lived in Switzerland, England, even Scandinavia, and Russia. Does it mean now that all the people of Europe were originally melanated and black? No. It simply means that you had a big migrant community of the African diaspora in Europe that had economic power. That's it. So if you tell that, I would say, amen. That's real history that they're hiding from you. But don't come with weird theories saying that, oh, blacks were already in America before the colonies, and the blacks in Americas, those that came from Europe, were actually Native Europeans that fled. I'm thinking, what? I'm thinking, what the heck? Come on now. Oh, Lord. Anyway, there was also this Tartaria deception came up in Russia, in which people believed that the Roman Empire and Greece never existed, and that Grand Tartaria was the great empire where equality ruled. But here's the thing, Tartaria was just a name for the subcontinent of Asia. Asia was divided in subcontinents. One of them was Tartaria. And Tartaria was just a region. It was not a country. It was not a nation. So this whole Tartaria and the mud flood theory is another BS that started on some online forum in Russia. Is set out to give people relief so you don't have to face things. Because if the Greek and Roman Empire did not exist, that means the crucifixion did not exist. That means that Christ did not exist. That means that the scripture is not real. That means that Christ is not real. And that promotes the New Age agenda. You get me? And the thing about FBA, Foundational Black Americans, that, oh, blacks were already here, is trying to disprove prophecy that talks about the tribe of Judah being scattered all over the place. All those deceptions are to undermine prophecy. That's it. But you cannot undermine prophecy, no matter what you do. So those delusional movements are a meltdown in themselves. That will crash in multiple other meltdowns. So just to get used to it, that meltdowns are going to be a frequent thing. But if you're living in the United States, you may already gotten used to it. All the mass shootings that happens almost daily. Just understand, meltdowns are going to be the norm in daily life. It's not something many people want to hear, but that's how it is. So we just learn how to deal with it constructively, and the best thing for us to do is to expand economically worldwide as believers, because that is what will benefit us in the long run. Right now, it's the time to separate as much as possible from society, so that you can have your own communities that are prosperous. Time for excuses is over. With all the meltdowns that keep unfolding, there's no time for excuses. We can't afford excuses anymore. And those churches are all about excuses. We can't afford all that anymore. We need to seriously work on and invest in economic power. And the wealth transfer will happen one way or the other. The way I see it now, it will be the depopulation of Europeans and East Asians that will leave many properties and many lands unoccupied, and that will be taken over by Judeans, and that's how reparations will flow naturally to us. That's how I see it's going to happen. Or maybe the Heavenly Father has a different way of doing it, but I don't know how long the restoration of Judah will take, but we will restore and be economically on the top, and then the other lost tribes of Israel will join too. That's what it's going to be. due to feminism and the enforcement of the 9 to 5, the birth rate amongst Europeans and East Asians declined. And because of that, they don't have that many stable families anymore. And that's why the economic strength is fading away also, due to the aging populations. So while they were trying to exterminate and shut down the tribe of Judah, they ended up shutting down themselves. But I'm not saying that, it's through the depopulation is going to happen. There may be other ways that the wealth will be transferred into Judean hands of black believers. But however it happens, it will happen. And here's the thing, Justin. The people from the United States, many of them are not aware of what's going on. But soon they will realize what's going on. And once it gets through to them that there is no turning back anymore, then you'll see an explosion of meltdowns. And the United States will devour itself. That's what you're going to see. They're just hiding this from you. Most of the meltdowns are not even reported in mainstream media. So that is where we're at. So do you understand now why it's important to be realistic about the times we're living in? Do you understand now why it's important to be economically minded in order to increase economically? And do you understand now that there is no turning back to the ease that was under the British and American era? Let me know in the live chat. Thank you very much. So be economically minded to expand economically. Use spiritual power, decrease declarations and prayers, combined with your physical actions to expand economically right now. No excuses. The time of going to church every Sunday and bullshitting about twisting scripture is over. So do what you have to do economically. If you're able to expand by raising another family, you do it. Do whatever you do or whatever you can for the glory of the Heavenly Father in the here and now, because we are meant to walk in life and abundance in the here and now. Despite all the meltdowns, despite the great tribulation, we will be at peace and prosperity on the earth. We are here to stay. We'll be forever here. This whole nonsense of, the Antichrist is coming, we're all going to die, because if you don't take if you take the microchip, you can't do anything. All that fear mongering we need to unlearn it and throw it away. We have to overcome in the resurrection power of Christ, and we'll be on the earth despite the meltdowns that keep increasing, and despite the great tribulation. We'll be here and we'll go through it while live in peace and prosperity on the earth in the here and now. That's what's going to happen. Plain and simple. Plain and simple, saints. So that is what I wanted to tell you this morning. Don't expect a sudden ease to come back. Don't pray delusional prayers. Offenses will come. Escalations will come. Explosions of resentment will come, and it will keep increasing and increasing. The one thing that remains stable is prosperity of the saints through the restoration of the tribe of Judah. So that's what you need to focus on. So when the Heavenly Father redirects you, be redirected. Be redirected. And now you understand why I have zero tolerance for church nonsense. I have zero tolerance for church mentality. That's why in my comment sections, as well as in my live streams, I'm very strict on the comments that I allow. Why? Because the great tribulation is coming. I don't know when it will happen, whether it's 40 years, 50 years, or I don't know. First, the restoration of Judah needs to happen. We're in it right now. But even during this restoration of the tribe of Judah, there are meltdowns here and there. People are losing it. So in this time of escalation to keep increasing, we cannot afford to debate church nonsense. We've done that for decades, and it didn't benefit us. We have to be firm and on code with Heavenly Father. I'm very firm, very strict in this. No church bullshit over here. Only the resurrection power of Christ. Amen. So, Kwa, if you listen to me, I'm going to reach out to you via WhatsApp after this live stream. Okay? Mark, keep going, keep moving forward, man. Joe, you got the power, Joe. You got the resurrection power, so just keep on going. Don't look behind anymore. Joe, keep on going. All of you, keep on going. We're not going back to 2008. We're not going back to February 2020. We're not going back to 2011. No. We're going to keep moving forward. So, okay, Kwa, I'm going to reach out to you right now. The rest of you, keep doing the will of Heavenly Father, and I'm waiting and I'm longing to see your receipts of victory. Agree with Christ, be at peace, and I'll see you next time.